Welcome to JustWannaQuilt, a research podcast coming out of Tulane University Law School, where we explore all kinds of things, stories about quilting, tools, field trips, maybe some famous quilters stop by, and, of course, a little bit of copyright thrown in just for fun. I'm Elizabeth Townsend-Guard, your host. I'm a law professor at Tulane University Law School. I also hold 2 fellowships right now, one at the Business School and one at the Newcomb Institute at Tulane. And I just want to quilt. All right, so here is part 2. We came back. We thought we would talk for a few minutes. We talked for an hour and a half about masks. And I swear it was just, I hope you like it. It was amazing. It was amazing. I felt like I was really finally feeling like I could figure out what to do when I was sewing masks. Yeah, she's remarkable. Okay, here she is, Dr. Songer again. Oh, and as in the first interview, Whitney and Lex are here with me. It's a great evening. You really, you're remarkable. So. This is part 2. I just got dinner here. So I'm going to mute so that I'm not crunching. So I think I guess my question is, let's start with you of what you really want quilters to know. And then Lex, why don't you follow up with questions? Okay. If people have heard everything we just talked about, it's a little overwhelming. So let's sort of, what do you want them to know? That's my question. As a scientist, as someone that really looked into this, as someone who really cares and has breathing issues yourself, what should we understand?
I think the first thing is how much we appreciate you, because all of these efforts to get masks out to as many people as we can, as quickly as we can, would not be happening without you. So first, thank you. Second is that even though it's complicated, it's worthwhile, and sort of keeping breathability in mind is always the most important thing, because we're covering the mouth and nose, and we just want to do that as safely as we can. So it has to be breathable, and it has to be something that people are willing to wear for the entire time they need to be wearing it. And so we don't have perfect solutions. We have good solutions, and the best solution is the mask that you're willing to wear. And then in terms of the science, ask questions, and as long as you keep asking questions, it will force people to come up with better answers. And that's really the thing. We're all in this together. We're all working to create better solutions to make our families, friends, and communities and healthcare providers safer. And we're doing an amazing job at that, even if the things we're doing aren't perfect yet. Let perfect be the enemy of the good.
That's really awesome. Lex, do you have questions?
Yeah. So I'm going to be a little bit nitty gritty and just try to really nail down the next steps for people. So I think there's sort of 2 sets of next steps. One is, maybe 3, sorry. So one is we've made all these masks, right? And you posed a couple solutions in part 1. One is make a polypropylene, non-woven polypropylene cover to go over the mask that we've made.
Yeah.
And you've correct me if any of this is wrong, but so you're suggesting that is superior to potentially making non-woven polypropylene filters to put in the filter slot?
I would say yes.
Okay. Would you say that making those filters, is that option better than nothing?
Yes.
Okay, so highest preference is cover, second preference is filter. Do you have any other insights in how to sort of, given that we've already made these cotton masks, how to modify them to improve them. Like the ones that we've already made, not looking forward yet.
Right. What I would do is really what I said before is if you can put one layer of non-woven polypropylene and have that go over it, then that will give you that extra water resistance and boost. And a lot of the non-woven polypropylene is pretty lightweight, and that's one of the advantages is it's really breathable. So you can put a layer of it over an N95, and the N95s are not the most breathable things in the world or the most comfortable, and it's still breathable. And so we tested that, and that's a big thumbs up. So a single layer over, yeah, is what I would do.
Okay, great. So we know how we're going to fix our imperfect masks of the past, if we're so inclined, right?
Right.
And then moving forward, like the gold standard, in your opinion, is the 3-layer non-woven polypropylene. So, like in an ideal scenario, where are we sourcing that material from?
Now that is the big challenge, right? Is that the ideal material in an ideal world is medical grade fun bond non-woven polypropylene. And there isn't a great, easily accessible to all of us source for that yet. And we've got people working on that and like trying to coordinate with the distributors, fabric distributors. It's something I haven't ever tried to do before, but I think that moving forward, that's what we would like to do, is to make it so that if this comes up again and as this continues, there's a place that we can point to and say, yes, for all the amazing people out there that can help out by making masks, these materials we've tested, we know they're great in a kit or however else, but we have a place to point people to that they can get the best materials possible.
Okay, so in the absence of like being able to buy a bolt of it,
right?
I know I'm being like very
no, you're
trying to be
you're
really
actually there. You're going for the practical
with you right now. So like, is the best thing to do to cut up my bags? Is that the best place to start, or is it better to start with the interfacing or?
Right. So I haven't been using the interfacing, so I can't personally attest to like how well that works for stand-up duration. But if it's a separate layer, you can kind of test that out on your own, essentially, like see if it's water resistant and see how it holds up as it gets washed. Or I recommend boiling or steaming to disinfect, but that's another whole like on the rabbit hole. The reason why I suggested the reusable bags if they're unused is because if they're designed to be touching food, then that gives you an extra level of safety information with them, right? Because food grade is designed to be touching food and for handling in ways that other materials aren't. So that was kind of like, if I could get it, I would go medical grade. I can't, so food grade is the next best.
Okay.
And then from there, I use conference bags because they're the same. They're designed to meet the same structures. So in terms of fiber density and tensile strength and weight and GSM, they're very similar. So that's kind of like the hierarchy that I use. And the interfacing, if you're using interfacing, you just have to make sure it's not the fusing interfacing because of the adhesives. And actually during the break, I got more information from folks with latex allergies. A lot of those adhesives are latex based.
Of course they are.
Right? but latex allergies and sensitivities develop over time. So the more exposure you have to them, the more likely you are to develop sensitivities and allergies. And so breathing that in constantly close to your face. Anyway,
it could create a latex allergy, even if you didn't have one, because latex is not something you're supposed to be breathing through. That's not like a standard thing. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And I haven't, I was just like just in general, we know there's so many bad things about inhaling adhesives.
Yeah.
But I'll look into the latex bit a bit more. But
I saw someplace
that would be really problematic.
So for Haley, who's not here right now, who's one of our law students who just graduated, we had gotten really into learning about, is it H600? There's a...
Halyard.
Halyard. Tell us about that, because I think on your site somewhere you say don't use that.
So the Halyard H600 is not just spun bond nonwoven polypropylene. It also includes melt blown nonwoven polypropylene. And so that changes the risk profile. It's really commonly used. And people, right, it's used in clinical hospital settings, so people have a lot of access to it.
Right.
I haven't seen breathability data on it yet, so the testing that I required for all my stuff. And I have made some masks out of it with a single layer.
Yeah.
And it's a little hot and humid for my liking. But
it's breathability that you're worried about, not safety. Is that right? I mean, safety in terms of, I mean, I know that the company says please, like, it seems like the company's freaking out a little bit. Like, suddenly their surgical wrap is being used for masks.
Yeah. And so there are a whole bunch of potential reasons for that. And I don't have all the answers.
Yeah.
I do know that for melt blown in general, when you cut it, it releases smaller particles into the air. In the particle size from the melt blown is the size that's really bad to inhale.
Interesting. Okay, so stay away from those because we just don't know, and they're hard to get anyway. Yeah. It's really impossible to get. We've tried.
Yeah.
So
it's hard to get, and in order to get improved performance on the water resistance, especially, they often use surface treatments and coatings to the materials. And some of those are things you really don't want to be inhaling. And I do not know. I have no data about whether or not the Halyard H600 does that and uses that.
They weren't made for that. I mean, that's the part that's so interesting. I mean, grocery bags weren't either, but I'm just saying that, like, it's confusing. Life is confusing.
Yeah, and especially when you're talking about things that have these extra surface treatments and coatings that are behind corporate paywalls, essentially, because they don't want you to know. And it's a challenge. It's a challenge when dealing with alternatively sourced materials, is that you're using things outside of the normal scope. And so for me, like, before I recommend things, I try to do a hazard analysis. Like, what are all the potential safety concerns, and have we thought about them? So it's this, like, interesting, cautious world of more good than harm. And that's one of the advantages of cotton, right? I'm sure people will say over and over and over again, it's really familiar. We know what it is.
Right.
We've been using it for over 100 years.
Right. We're not scared of it. Right.
Not scared of it. And so there are some real benefits to that.
Yeah.
All right. So sorry about getting, like, distracted down that rabbit hole. For the spun bond nonwoven polypropylene, I recommend washing it first, right? So that you get anything from the manufacturing processes rinsed out at the very least.
Yeah.
Right. And that's one of the things you can do. And then, I've done, I think you looked on the webpage, a ton of research into sort of the background and what the risks are for the materials, and the safety data sheets, when you can find them, help. And then this is all distracted from your original question about what the hierarchy.
We care about all this stuff, so it's all good.
Yeah, what the hierarchy is of the choices for the materials. And mostly you want to find stuff that hasn't been coated, doesn't have extra treatments to it, and that is breathable, right? That is going to stand up whatever your washing, cleaning, and disinfection procedures are, and that has water resistance and some filtration. And so the filtration bit is a part that most of the data in research coming out is on the water resistance. Is something that you can test at home, either by flicking water at it, or there are all sorts of ways. I take a little, the cough syrup cups that they give you, or a teaspoon of water, so it's 5 milliliters, and just put it over a jar, pour the water on, and see if it goes through in 60 seconds. And you can make that quantitative, which is nice.
I like this. This is really helpful. This is very helpful.
And then for breathability, I have a little DIY home test for that as well, which is because some people are like, they take it up and they put it to their mouth and they breathe through it. And for materials that you're not sure about, I just hate the idea of like putting it up to your mouth and then trying to breathe through it.
Yeah.
So I use a toilet paper tube, right? And then take an elastic band, put the material over the end, and then blow a lint ball or a piece of a cotton ball with it. And you can see how far it goes. But like, if you can't blow through it, you can't move that lint ball, it's not breathable.
That's really interesting. And breathability is really a key thing for
Absolutely.
you. And I think that's really interesting to think about, that that's such an important component of it. Okay, so I'm at Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to figure out. It seems like when I look at the polypropylene, just like the sheets of it, very confusing. And I don't feel totally comfortable with it. Because I don't know, there's a lot of, I just can't make a decision. Then I went to the reusable grocery bags.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like if you can find one, how have you been finding your bags? Because you've got some behind you. Tell me your strategy of how you are finding bags.
So these on the wall behind me, my mom found them and purchased them on Amazon.
See? Amazon.
So I'd have to ask her what her strategy was for that. I know that we've gotten a lot of bags donated. So all the big conferences that have been canceled, all the canceled conferences.
That's really great.
Grocery stores, which aren't allowed to use them right now.
Really?
Right?
That's funny.
Yeah. So they're not. So all the savings bank in our town, a pile of them that they were willing and able to donate. So being able to get them on Amazon is a new thing for the last 2 months. As soon as people realized that they could be used in masks, they were impossible to get.
Got it. Yeah.
Kind of like bias tape.
It's still a little bit hard. Bias tape. Yeah, well, right. So we bought a serger so we could make bias tape quickly on our own because it was too... The ties are really killing me, I have to say. So that was one of the things we did. So I'm looking at these, and it is hard to find ones that are There's a lot of nylon ones, and that's not what you want. You want the ones that are polypropylene.
Polypropylene. Yeah, I can look after we get off the call and see if I can find the search parameters that help with that.
Okay.
And I know I'm working with some companies to try to get more consistent materials out there more easily. And we were lucky. We've had a bunch of folks donate materials, but there are still a lot out there. It's just a pain to sort of break down and cut up the bags to make it into masks instead of just using the fabric where you don't need instead of getting it by the yard, right?
Exactly. That would be the most ideal. I was also looking at wholesale companies because you could probably go there and get stuff that just not put the logo on it.
Right.
Yeah. 80 okay, so tell me more. So I went to one, it said 80 GSM non-woven polypropylene. What GSM are we looking for?
So 80 GSM is a good one. Oh. I like 80 GSM for the outer layer. And one of the advantages of using something that's 70 or 80 GSM is that the melting point tends to be a little bit higher. So sometimes lower weights are made differently, so they don't hold up quite as well. And that's been one of the challenges with some of the crafting materials.
Yeah.
Is that they don't hold up to the boiling and sterilization techniques. And mostly what that tells me is that they probably have polyethylene in them, which is a different plastic, which shrinks a lot. It melts at boiling temperature instead of 100 degrees Celsius higher.
And if you see ones that say non-woven propylene, but it doesn't tell you anything more, is that okay? Oh no, 80 GSM. Tell us about the thickness in GSM? Because are there other thicknesses we should be looking at, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah. So I look for 60 to 80 GSM because that gives you pretty consistent properties throughout, and mostly 80. And if I can get it the food grade, and that's harder to come by. So the stuff that's designed to be washed, the stuff that's designed to be reusable. There's been some challenges with Olefun, the crafting non-woven polypropylene, which you sometimes can get by the yard.
Okay.
And I haven't gotten any. By the time I heard about it, it had sold out.
Yeah.
But the melting point of it, it's more plasticky and not designed to be fabricy. And so that's one of the challenges as well. I'm going to try to see. We got some nice. When I look at it, I don't know if you can see in the focus on the screen.
Yeah, I like that. What is that?
So this is what I look for when I'm looking at the non-woven polypropylene, is to see if it has this sort of diamond
kind of like dimple
pattern.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, let's see. Is it
okay.
Yeah. And that's pretty characteristic of this spun bond non-woven polypropylene, unlike the other variants of non-woven.
Got it. Interesting. Alexa, do you have other questions?
Oh, yeah.
Here's something oh, Alexa, stop.
Sorry. Yeah, so that was all really helpful. So I think one other set of masks that I think would be really good to make more concrete for people is like, what is the set of masks that in your opinion are harmful? So we've talked about non-breathable masks and the harm in that.
Yeah.
You briefly mentioned single layer masks as being able to, or it's potentially harmful. If you could maybe talk a little bit more about that and then like add whatever else to the list.
Right. So I definitely have do not use list. Like anything that even remotely might have fiberglass in it is a no. Anything with
vacuum cleaner bags seemed like that was crazy when people were like, that seems scary to me. Maybe
vacuum
not.
Cleaner bags aren't breathable.
No.
So that gets back to the don't use, if it's not breathable, I don't care how good the particle filtration is. No. Right. And that one actually comes up more frequently than you would think.
Really?
Yeah, because people are going, oh, I just need to get the particle filtration so that I'm protected, and they don't try walking up the stairs with it.
Right.
So anything that you can't wear for 15 minutes is not going to work.
Yeah.
Okay? So adhesives, latex is for so many people a problem. When you start talking about materials with coatings on them, that also is a problem. And it comes up a lot with metallic, metal infused materials, which once again, like the copper based, silver, whatever materials, which may have antibacterial or antiviral properties, although frequently they haven't been tested for that. That's hard to do as a DIY home test.
Yeah.
But that's often achieved with coatings. Okay. Coatings that are maybe okay to touch your skin, but just because you can have something contact your skin does not mean you should be breathing it in.
Right. That makes sense.
That is a consideration that I think people need to think about. And then the other is we're making masks designed to be reusable, right? whether they're cotton, polypropylene, polyester, nylon, they're designed to be reusable, which means you have to have a way to clean them, and you need to know that all the layers are getting cleaned and disinfected. Right? And that part of the conversation, I think, often gets ignored because it's not as cool as talking about the particle filtration. But how are you going to clean it? Can you clean it, and can you clean it effectively? And so that leads you into bleach, which both the CDC and the WHO say is an okay thing to clean your mask with. And I say caution, like all the little caution flags should be going up.
Because it's bleach.
Because it's bleach, and you are putting it over your mouth.
Right.
And nose. So if you do use bleach, which I don't recommend, make sure you rinse it, and rinse it.
Yeah.
Because it's one of the known challenges with laundering even, is that if you don't get even rinsing, you can end up with more bleach in concentrations than you anticipate. And though you can smell it at levels where it is well below being hazardous, most of us don't have a good way to tell where on that spectrum things are. And I don't have a DIY test for that yet. So I say no bleach.
No bleach. So
no bleach. You can boil the masks, right? If you want, for disinfection, boiling. Boiling works.
I heard people putting them in the microwave. That's not a good idea either.
Yeah, microwaving is not a great idea, especially because if you have a mask that's getting a good fit, it probably has a nose piece of some kind. This is a nose piece. This is one of the coffee tabs I was telling you about. Right. And they fit very well, very nicely. But most of them have metal in them, and you don't want to put things with metal in the microwave. That is just a bad plan.
How long should you boil it for?
So I recommend boiling for 10 minutes.
Okay.
WHO recommends 1 minute. This is a really good segue into the why of that. The WHO recommendation of 1 minute is assuming that the mask is submerged in the water the whole time you're bringing it up to temperature, that you're boiling it for a minute, and then you are letting it cool down all the way back to room temperature in that same pot of water. So if you do that, then 1 minute may be okay. There are a lot of variables in that, like how hot is it outside? How long does it take to cool down? You're leaving your mask inside the pot of water for this long period of time, and it lends itself to forgetting about the mask in the pot of water. And then you're leaving it sitting in a warm bath of water for some unknown amount of time.
Nothing wrong with that.
Which is problematic. So I recommend just boiling it for 10 minutes and then hanging it to dry. Then you know that it's been at that temperature for a minimum amount of time. And especially with masks with pleats or masks with seams, you have multiple layers, and you want to make sure that you actually get that heat level consistent throughout the entire thing to maximize the disinfection. So I stand by my 10 minutes.
And can you give us just a layman-ish version of why one layer is harmful?
So I wouldn't say that it is harmful. I would say that it is less good, which I guess is a hedge. But with one layer, you don't get as much. You don't get as much of a barrier, and if there are inconsistencies in the material, if there's a needle hole through it, or if there's a seam, a lot of the designs have a seam down the middle, and with a single layer, it increases the odds of things just going through the seams. And as I say, if there's any sort of little bit of damage, then that's a failure point. if you have 2 layers, that reduces the risk of any individual imperfection, giving you a straight route out. So
you were
for
like
that is redundancy.
It would act as a diffuser.
Oh,
right?
yes. Yeah.
So that's why I was asking that question. Like, if you're only wearing 1 layer, it could actually like spread the germs out more.
In a broader, so not as far out in front of you, but maybe in a broader area in the meantime. And that's going to depend on the kind of material.
Okay.
But that would be my concern with a single layer. It goes to both of those.
Okay. But a single layer is probably better than nothing.
Absolutely. Yes.
Great. And Dr. Tomsgar, do you have anything else in this area before I shift?
Yeah, I want to just go over kind of the cotton chiffon. Like we can get that list up if you want, but it can you help us understand that list and how to understand that study that came out? I know we talked about it before, but just as a summary.
Do you want to share your screen on that particular one?
Yeah, let me take a look. You guys keep chatting. Let me find it because I closed it and I'm not sure where. It'll just take me.
All right.
Okay, so I want to sort of shift the conversation a little bit. So I come from a school of public health where I'm a PhD student. I came into this problem as the person that was putting all the hospital requests together so that people were donating through like sanctioned channels.
Right. Yeah.
Because like my big concern as someone that is like worried about liability and things like that is like we want to make sure that the masks are going to like the administrators who can make sure that they're being used in a clinically appropriate way.
Right.
So that was my whole shtick here. But so my next set of questions is sort of about how we can start educating healthcare facilities about these masks. Like, sort of like, have you done that? Have you had a good response from healthcare facilities? Do you have any ideas about how we can continue to do that?
So that's a whole nother can of worms. And yes, I've been working on that and have some ideas. So one of the things I've been doing is keeping up with the regulatory side of things and the FDA guidance and emergency use authorizations and the kind of triaging of supplies there, as well as the risk alternate profiles and all of that. And that's a challenging one. Most people don't want to spend a lot of time digging into the regulatory side of things, but a lot of the requirements are put there to help ensure safety, especially as we get into these other bigger issues. So for mask makers, an important thing there is the labeling, right? Making sure that what is in the masks is known for whoever is using them, especially in healthcare context, because I mean, we've talked about latex allergies probably 5 times already, but it's just such a big one that people aren't used to thinking about. And so having the appropriate labeling with what materials are actually in the mask is really important. And then the cleaning and disinfection instructions is also required by those FDA labeling requirements. And they pretty much apply to people, whether they are manufacturers like Old Navy or somebody in their home making masks for their local hospital. So that is a challenge. And then, we talked a little bit before about knowing what the mask is designed for and what the mask is going to be used for, and sort of clarifying that, I think, is going to be important both for the general public, but also for healthcare facilities. A lot of the masks they need are for the patients coming in the door, for the same reason we need them in the general public, right? And sort of the requirements for what that mask needs to be are very different than what the requirements need to be if you are going to be in an operating room, right? Where blood might be spurting. And right now, the guidance and the things that hospitals are looking for in masks traditionally right, is based on, well, surgical masks, which can withstand blood, synthetic blood at high pressures. So for ORs and trauma, and then respirators, which are for airborne contaminants. So figuring out how these new classes of masks fit into that is a challenge, and has been one of the things that the hospitals and administrators and mask makers are all sort of working to try to figure out the language and requirements for that.
Very interesting.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, definitely. So I think, I mean, the hospitals are really asking for multi-layer cotton masks almost exclusively.
Right.
And I think it's because in a lot of ways they just sort of adopted what Deacon S was doing. So I think there is like an opportunity to sort of educate them about the work that you're doing in the up and coming science, and sort of see if they have preferences for these masks, like taking into account the differences. But I would love to sort of like move forward and think about how we can do that in case we have another round.
Yeah, and I think you're right there. And a lot of how the adoption has been going is hospital by hospital.
Yeah.
Right. And so I know in our area we have a number of hospitals that are like, yes, we want to use the maker mask designs that you have with the non-woven polypropylene. We've gotten a sense of how we wash and disinfect them and sort of what the requirements and rules are. But in general, in hospital settings, reusable masks have not been the standard, because if you're reusing a mask, you need to be able to disinfect it and or sterilize it. And in hospital settings, those words mean very specific things, right? And you actually need both cleaning and disinfection, and you need to demonstrate that you are getting the level of disinfection you need. And so in most of the hospital contexts, all of the masks that are being made, whether they're cotton or otherwise, it's a scary thing because it's not going through the normal processes. So helping figure out that, yes, they can be disinfected and sterilized or autoclaved is important, but it's not the way they're used to processing things. And so with cotton, a lot of that is going into the laundering facilities, which are off-site in many cases. And those processes rely on bleach for disinfection. So that then gets me back into that, have we actually done the hazard analysis for when you're doing that kind of batch processing of things? Because most of the things you put through the laundry aren't things that you're going to be breathing through.
Amazing. One related, or sort of, we got a recent request from our local library. They want to give out masks to people as they come into the library. And again, what are we supposed to be making for them? Like these kind of requests come in all the time, and I don't know. You think about kids and grown-ups and all kinds of people that are going to come in, and I don't know if I think it's gotten passed on to somebody else at the moment, but still, I don't know what the answer is.
Right. Well, and I think that these are cases where, Alexa, people with public health expertise really come in handy, because one of the things that we really need are just massive public outreach and education campaigns on how do you use a mask? How do you wear it correctly? How do you put it on? How do you take it off? Why is it that it's not okay to pull it down below your nose, right? And just how do you wear it correctly? Because I every night, right, on the news, I see all these people with masks, and I sit there going, oh, no. Right?
Yeah.
And it's because this is a new thing for people. So they don't know that they need to, adjust the nose bridge down, and that every time they take their hands up their mask and touch the front of it and move it around, anything that's on the outside of the mask is now on their hands, and anything that's on their hands is now on their face. And that's not good. And that loops back into your question about what should the library be using. What the library should be using is what people in the grocery store should be using, which is what the general public, when they go into enclosed spaces, should be using, right? And that is the thing that the argument rages on. What the CDC recommends, it's not the same as what the WHO recommends, is not the same as what I recommend, and is not the same as, right? There's still so much variation out there that it's a struggle, I think, for everybody. So that's not the cut and dry,
no,
everybody should do this answer.
I think that's a nice segue to, let's take a look at this. This is the nano, the ACS, is it the American Chemical Society, the nano study that was about looking at different layers of fabric.
What was the author and the year on it?
Yeah, it just
There's
came
a new
out.
one out now.
There it is, right there.
Oh yeah, the condom
This
paper.
is this one, right? This is the one that's getting all the attention. That came out. When did it come out? Do we see the date? Julie, June 9th. No, that's when I downloaded it. When did it come out? Oh, published April 24th. So.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So they.
Don't worry. The WHO guidance references a new ACS nano paper.
A new one.
That's the one that's all about the non-woven polypropylene.
That's the one. Yeah, I haven't seen that one. We'll have to take a look at that one.
June 2nd. And it's still it's been accepted and it's available, but it's not in the pretty finished format
We'll
yet.
have to take a look. So, okay, so here we see, and it's like, right, so this is, help us understand this table. It's saying filtration efficiencies of various test specimens at a flow rate of 1.2 CFM and corresponding differential pressure across the specimen. What they're trying to do is see, they're looking at filtration where you're looking at breathability and protection. Like, filtration comes into yours because the polypropylene is what's keeping things out. But they weren't looking at breathability necessarily. They were looking at.
So their pressure differential is their measure of breathability.
Oh, that's
the delta P.
Okay, so tell me, when you look at this, what do you see? Because I see a lot of numbers where I'm thinking I should just look at the numbers that are high.
Right. Yeah, well, I mean, part of that is definitely true, right? N95s do well. We all know that. 99% filter efficiency. That's good. And the pressure drop is really small, which is good. And then as you go up, the pressure drops are mostly a little bit higher, though they're relatively close. And then, yeah, that is the challenge, right? I'm trying to zoom in and see here. So it's cotton quilt.
Let me see if I can make it bigger for you.
If you use a cotton quilt, it has good. It works okay.
What they're saying, this is the weirdest part. What they're saying a cotton quilt is cotton batting and cotton. I'm not sure how that pressure differential is 2.5 when you're literally breathing a quilt in. That's bizarre to me, right?
It is a bit bizarre. What I found, so one of the combinations that I tested early on, I didn't use a cotton quilt, but I used polyester batting. I used batting with a layer of non-woven polypropylene on either side because that was something that I could get and have. And, it works okay in terms of filtration. I know that when I was in the desert and the forest and the smoke from the fires was nearly choking me, one of the things I tried was taking my, quilted jacket up over my mouth to try to block the air that way. And so, sure, it filters decently well. And I'm surprised that their pressure differential is as good as it is.
Yeah, and they said they were using cotton with, they said that the way the cotton is put together, it's got a polyurethane, scrim.
Interesting.
And that's why it was okay, but they weren't using polyester. They weren't using polyester batting. They were using cotton batting that had a scrim.
Yeah. So in general, it works. The challenge there is that it is so hot.
I know.
And And this is one of those things that gets into the CO2 accumulation and diffusion and buildup, which is a whole nother can of worms, which if you have a loose fitting mask, doesn't matter as much. If you have an N95 cell mask with a really good fit, that batting cracks the air into this weird buffer and you get carbon dioxide diffusion and accumulation, which you don't get if you're just using cotton, right? So quilting, I would still say is bad for a lot of reasons, and it
was really weird. I'm like, I got a lot of that. I got rolls of that.
Right. Well, wear it around in a mask for an hour, and then come back and
try it. Well, that's why we're going to try them. Right, we're going to make them and try them. The other one that seemed really promising was the cotton / chiffon, and that's gotten a lot of attention.
So the cotton and chiffon layer there.
Of course, and then they gave us a list of what chiffon they used, which we can replicate.
Right. So I haven't done the deeper dive into chiffons. So I would have to kind of do another look at that more closely.
Yeah, it's the others. Do you think, I mean, this is not a science, so see, what they did is they gave us all, but look at where they went, but they did give us the number, so you can look it up at Joann's store.
Yeah, that's really convenient.
Yeah, it was really good.
Oh, don't use anything with spandex.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the stretchy materials are bad, and I guess that would be my challenge with chiffon, and because it looks like it is
spandex.
Personally spandex, because that stretchy bit means that the picture isn't accurate, because as you pull it tight, get a good fit, it increases the pore size, so it increases the gaps and the holes, and your filtration isn't as good. So it probably, I'd have to look again at the details. Yeah. I've been so sucked into the paper that just came out with the WHO guidance.
Yeah, with the 3 layers, right?
Yeah, talking about the 3 layers. And the paper there, it's on the Maker Mask website under the WHO guidance. I did a quick summary of the findings under the research blog, yeah. So, page down some more. I put a nice picture. Yeah, there it is. Whoop.
Do I see it?
You scrolled by it. It's up a little higher.
This one? Right here. Oh,
yeah,
polyester, and this is what
PPs, they're polypropylene, yeah.
But the polyester is also strong.
Right, and this is what I was mentioning before with the light blue column is the electrostatically charged.
Yeah.
So, but even without the charge, the quality factor, and that's the balance of breathability and filtration.
Yeah.
So taken together is what they're going with.
I mean, you must have been thrilled by this study that it really sort of confirms what you were saying about the polypropylene. It's the best one.
I was excited to see somebody else say polypropylene in their out loud voice. Yes.
Right. Multi-layer polypropylene material is superior, at least comparable to materials used in some medical face masks. Amazing. Yeah. All right. Well, I've already ordered some bags at Amazon, so we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, and that's one of the challenges, like being able to have the number for Joann's fabric for the material that you can actually get that is the exact thing is just so helpful. And that's
they did not do that with cotton though. I'm really frustrated with that study. They just were like cotton, and then they did the same with the flannel too. It was terrible. They got flannel from Walmart, and I can't find it. They didn't even say what the number was, or they just said Walmart Superstore, and that to me just seemed a little not so scientific. Is all I'm saying.
Yeah. And that is a really interesting thing watching all the studies come out about the materials is they're not as scientific, and there's a gap between a lot of the testing that's being done and then the real world scenario.
Seriously.
So
Walmart
which one?
Fabric Center. Who does that? Seriously.
Make sure you get the red one.
Right, exactly. Right.
Sorry.
I couldn't find it. They're all 100% cotton there at Walmart. And then this one's too cotton. The quilter's cotton is totally weird, but the 100% cotton, it's just a sheet, right? They used a sheet. But they didn't do any tests, and we didn't see anything on batiks. We didn't see, I don't know. I just wanted them to be a little more precise.
That seems totally reasonable to me. I like the 100% silk NA.
Right, not. What do you mean NA? Do they know what NA means? Not applicable? Like, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is applicable.
It means they took it out of their pajamas like we did.
That's so insane. They wouldn't stand for that. It makes me think, like, come on. Like, that stuff, what it does is it makes me doubt their conclusions. That's the problem I have with it. Is that because the little bit that I know they didn't get right, it makes me not trust the science.
Yeah.
Right?
I think that's a real challenge. So they provide information on the porosity, which is good, and the thread diameter. But that doesn't translate to things that we can check and verify at home. Yeah. And when we're trying to source materials. And it is just, I also call it the apples and oranges problem too, because the data itself, everybody's measuring it slightly different ways and providing different numbers. And at least for this, they provided you information on N95s, which they gathered as well, so that there's some normalization.
Yeah.
Right. And then, I don't know, the studies, the batik, what does that mean? That doesn't...
Yeah.
It doesn't translate, as you say, information that's usable by you to figure out how to replicate it. Right. So how do you replicate it? And then how do you wash it? Like, how does the disinfection and cleaning work? They get the same numbers.
Right.
And can they be cleaned? And that's another big can of worms.
Right.
And it's because the science is so new for this.
Yeah.
Right? Before, you were talking about where things were in November.
Right.
So where was all the data and research for homemade masks in November? And the answer was there were very few studies, and the materials were even less well specified than the ones we're seeing out in these new studies. And so in November, most of the science for DIY masks is 200 years old. Sorry, 100 years old.
And they had some crazy ones about like tea towels and t-shirts. And it's like, who's going to make a mask out of a tea towel? I mean, I guess if like you were like, you had a tea towel and you had to make an emergency mask, but like as a quilter, we're like not going out to get tea towel fabric. So it was this interesting disconnect really early on of,
Right. And that disconnect makes a lot more sense when you think about it in terms of a lot of those masks were being used for air pollution and smoke.
Right.
Which is not the same as infection control. And so there's this study showing that if you put a nylon over your mask, nylons, right, it improves the fit and gives you a great fit. And I look at that and I go, oh my gosh, how do you take those nylons off in the context of infection control?
Yeah.
How do you get it off? It's stretchy, so like you're getting anything that's on that mask all over you, and then you're pulling it up over your face, past your eyes, over your hair, so anything that was on the outside of the mask is now on the inside as you pull it up and off over your head, or you have to put your hands in it and pull it out and up. And how do you do that without getting anything that's on that mask all over you and your hands on your face?
Yeah.
So I'm just going to say that for COVID, I have problems with using the nylons on the outside. For smoke, for like airborne stuff that you need an N95 for, absolutely. I think it's great. If I'm having trouble with I have some reusable masks for air pollution and smoke. then the nylon solution seems fine. But that one, I do not recommend that for COVID.
Very interesting. Well, this is really, really interesting. I think that you've given us a ton to think about, and the science is just going to continue, and I think it'll get more clear. Do you feel like, so there's kind of this weird moment of people like, almost like, oh, well, we're done with this, right? There's a sense of like, we've moved on, which is so bizarre. What do you think? Do you think we should still be making masks and getting ready for the fall? And like, what are your thoughts about as people come back to school? And I mean, there's just a lot going on at the moment, and I'm curious where masks fit in.
Right. I think everybody is. I think that right now is a good time for us to be recollecting and having these conversations and thinking about next steps while we kind of stop and take a breath and try to get knowledge about how to wear masks correctly. Try to get that to be pervasive. And as we hit summer, I think we're going to actually see another bump in demand because the masks that we've been using through the colder months are not as usable now that it's really hot. So thinking about how we are going to adapt to have masks that provide the best protection we can, that are wearable, that we can actually wear while we're out doing the things that we do in the hotter months. Because that our target should be to make sure that whatever mask people have on, they are willing and able to wear it for the amount of time that they are out and about and in higher risk areas. And for us to think about these questions of how we make masks for kids and what safe combinations for kids are.
What do you think that is? What do you think that is?
So that is a good question. It's one of those things where I'm like, oh, everything is a little bit riskier with kids because they're smaller and that it's scarier to be in the unknown there. We've been making masks for my nieces and nephews and for the kids, and we do scaled down versions of the Maker Mask Surge, so the pleated masks. And we've been doing them with 2 layers of non-woven polypropylene. In general, I'm erring on the side of decreasing by 1 layer for kids.
Because why?
Because their lung capacities aren't as big. They're not exchanging as much air as forcefully as adults. And so there's some data that you can sort of break down the age ranges for. But that's the reason kids are not just miniature adults. And for people who grew up doing CPR for kids, so I used to teach CPR for kids and adults, and the breath size that you use if you're doing respirations is different, right? So anyway, lung volumes are different, and the force with which air exchange happens is different. So I want to make sure that kids are wearing something that's really breathable. Once again, it goes back to my thing about breathability.
Yeah.
Because what are the reasons that people take masks off or pull them down so they're just covering their mouth and not their mouth and their nose? And there are 2 reasons. Usually, one is it's not very breathable, and the other is that it's getting too hot and feels kind of like claustrophobic. And both of those things, like, that happens when the mask isn't breathable enough. So I definitely think you're way better off with 2 layers and wearing it for the entire hour you're out. And this is true whether you're an adult or a kid, than having the best filter in the world that you're only willing to wear for 15 minutes. Because
and
after
if you've
that,
got like a kid that's sensitive, or the polypropylene putting a muslin or cotton so that it's comfortable is completely fine on the inside. Absolutely. But having the outside being the polypropylene.
Yep, that's what I would do. And I know that in this, we'll put in that lower age limit just as a reminder. The CDC says no masks for kids under 2. in other countries, some say no mask for kids under 3. So I would just keep that in mind for young children. For anybody that can't take the mask off on assisted, they shouldn't be wearing a mask.
That's good
right?
to know.
And that's getting into there are just so many different avenues to discuss.
Yeah.
And for kids that have sensory issues, that's where I do recommend that innermost layer. If you have a pair of cotton pajamas or anything that they love and that's comfortable, that they're willing to have touch their skin, then I would do that. And and once again, it's age dependent, but depending on age, I always make sure there are 2 masks so that
that's what we did.
They have one.
One that's clean and one that's dirty, so that you can.
And we make matching masks for their dolls.
You do.
Toys,
That's really great.
For the nieces and nephews, they get them, and their dolls.
Nice. I like that. Throwing them in the wash, is that okay? Can we do it that way? Like is it just not getting them clean enough if you put them in the wash on a hot? Because you did say that you were putting some of them in a lingerie bag.
Yeah. So when I wash them, I put them in the lingerie bag because of the nose piece, right? So that doesn't get deformed.
Yeah.
And then, be careful with the detergents you use and the hottest temperature that's reasonable. And for the non-woven polypropylene, I hang dry.
You hang dry.
Right.
And do you think that would be okay if you had a cotton side of it, or would you be washing?
It takes longer to dry with the cotton, so that's the downside there.
But you're okay with putting it in like hot water, washing it? You're putting it on hot, right? I imagine.
Yeah.
Hot, and then letting it hang dry.
Yep.
Right.
And if you don't want to hang dry, tumble dry low.
Tumble dry low. I feel like I have some direction. I feel like I'm going to make some that are 3. I ordered the bags. I'm going to make 3 that are, and we also have some polypropylene that we got that's very thin. I'm not sure what that is, but maybe I could put it in between or something like that.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to make 3 layers. I'm going to make 2 layers. I'm going to make 2 layers with a cotton, so that we'll have those to sort of test, to sort of see how people feel about them and have them ready to go.
Yep.
That seems about right.
Yeah. And I have to admit, right, when I go out hiking, I use a 2-layer non-woven polypropylene.
You do. Because you just need it. It's too thick if you're really exerting for you. And also you're not in the middle of people either, right? There's not a lot of people around.
For me, it's a lower risk environment. I stay at least 6 feet away from everyone as much as possible, and it's an outdoor space, so it's not the risk parameters are different. When I go to the grocery store, I wear my 3-layer one, and I'm used to using masks, and that makes a difference because it isn't the same as when you don't have something over your mouth and nose. No matter how good it is, right?
Really
it's still
Yeah.
different. And so I have to remind myself when I first put it on that just breathe easy, a couple of breaths, and get used to it again, and not try to run up the stairs right away.
Yeah, it's interesting because I did that I did housework in a mask, sort of just to get used to it, to sort of say at what point does it seem impossible, and sort of just get used to sort of how it is without having it being outside,
And that's the thing I haven't heard other people talk about either, is practice, right? Whenever you're using something different, a new tool, right? It takes practice.
Yeah.
Right. And face masks are kind of, right. They're trying to say medical equipment without saying medical equipment. It's getting late for me, so I'm losing the right word.
You've spent so much time with us. So I just want to tell you, this has been life-changing. I mean, you spent 2 hours now with us, and we're going to air it together. And I know everyone's going to be just beyond excited to hear this, because this is really, you are who we've been looking for. And it's been very, I feel like I have direction, and I don't feel like I had, Lex, do you feel that way too? I feel like I have direction. which I really didn't before this conversation.
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, I'm a health economist and I'm not a science person. And what I was trying to do was I read all the studies and trying to do the best approximation of what was in the study, but it was a very poor substitute, sort of what we've been talking about. I didn't feel like I could really replicate it with any confidence. So I think this is really great to have a scientist that actually understands the materials we can get, because that's a big deal.
Yeah,
it is. And I want to just say that, right, this is a hard problem. If this was easy, right, if there was one obvious, everybody do this pattern, this exact materials, and everybody can get them, then we'd be doing it. And it wouldn't be as hard.
Yeah.
Right. So it's hard for everybody to be sorting through all of this, and because we expect the big people in the chain from the really high up places to be saying, yes, this is what everybody should be doing. And we thought we were going to get that in March. And then we thought we were going to get that in April. And then we thought we were going to get that in June.
Right.
And the world is still converging on best practices. And I think we're all getting better and better as we go. Mm-hmm. And that part is exciting.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. It's been a really interesting intersection of science and sewing that was unexpected.
Yeah, and DIY efforts.
Right. You feel like you've spent some interesting quality time with your mom, I would imagine.
Yes. And she's like, oh, she's way better at sewing than I am. So, and we have one machine, right? One nice sewing machine. And she's like, you run the sewing machine with a lead foot. Just slow it down. So things will come out straighter.
I like that. I really do. Yeah. Well, thank you again. Do you have anything else you want to say before we complete our?
Well, I was going to ask Whitney if she had any questions or comments.
I think that, let me check. I wrote some stuff down and I think that it might have all been answered. One thing that I did want to know is when all of these studies and about masks are coming out, and just scientific articles in general, how do you go about analyzing the research, and what do you assess when you're looking through all of it?
Oh, no, that is a really good question, and probably a whole course, right?
Yeah, I just found myself recently reading some research, and I'm like, oh, I haven't taken science since I was a freshman in college, so I was like,
yeah. So, what do I look for in the research articles? I first check to see if they're original research and if they've been peer-reviewed, because that makes a big difference. A lot of the stuff that's coming out is meta-analysis, which is stretching back for 3 decades. And for me, I read all those older papers at the beginning, so I'm curious to see what the new ones are. And I would look to see if they have error bars, if they have more than one sample, right? And and a lot of them are talking about using the same word, right? About particle filtration. And particle filtration means about 1,000 different things as far as I can tell, depending on who's saying it. So I look to see if the method they're using is the same as anything else and anywhere else, because if I can't compare it to other things, then it's not super helpful. So I look for that, does it have information about N95, surgical masks, and, this kind of things for comparators. And I guess that's not specific, but that's where I start.
No, I think that's great, because I was like, how does a layman or a laywoman like myself go about this? And I guess just in the beginning, I wrote down, I was wondering, given your personal history with respiratory illness, how did you view the current pandemic when it was starting and the progression of it?
Yeah, so I think it meant that I was cautious earlier. So I actually went to Las Vegas for a conference in January, which was pretty early on, and I knew that I was going to be backpacking for a week out in the desert in the winter afterwards without having any contact with what was going on. So I went to that prepared, essentially. I had my masks with me. I wear a mask when I fly all the time anyway, pre-COVID, in the pre-COVID world. I did that because I just used to get sick whenever I got home from a vacation. It's like predictable. 7 days after getting off the plane, I would get a new respiratory illness. So that was kind of where I was heading into it. And then because of my previous respiratory history, I have in a pile almost every commercially available reusable mask that was in existence before, as well as disposable masks. So I had a full set of them to kind of look at and compare, and a lot of experience with what I liked and disliked and absolutely abhorred in masks.
Yeah.
So that kind of gave me some context to be thinking about it probably a month earlier than a lot of other folks were.
That's really interesting. And were you afraid of, given your situation, I'm sure you were super cautious and you're a super careful person from what we've learned over the last few hours. But how did you, this is a respiratory, this caused blood clots in your respiratory system, right? That's what we know about it, and lots of other things. But how did you feel about that personally?
I think like everybody else, nervous, right? It's scary, and I'm a first responder too. So my first impulse was to want to get out on the front lines to help, because that's who I am. And it was really hard to not be in a position to help in the way that I wanted to help, right? And for me, deciding to pour my heart and soul and science into these mask efforts was my way of helping, because I couldn't physically be on the first line.
Right.
So I wanted to do what I could to help my friends who were, because, right, the first responders, the EMTs, the firefighters, the people who show up on the scene and weren't being prioritized in the triage of who needs PPE.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, as a former EMT, as a first responder, I want a mask that's going to provide me as much of a barrier to bodily fluids as I can get.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? I found through all of the interviews and things that we've been doing, I think that the main thing that I've found is that the people who have been getting involved with the effort of mask making, it's honestly just become a way of coping with everything going on with the pandemic.
Yeah, it's a way to channel the energy into something positive.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I started cutting fabric, and I had so much anxiety about the pandemic and everything going on, and then just cutting fabric, even though it was mindless labor almost, it was it just was so calming in a way, because I felt like I was helping and I was getting a hand or taking control of.
Yeah, finding the things that you can do, because right, as the pandemic especially initially was spreading, and that spread felt like that it wasn't something we could do anything about.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think for me that hit at a secondary level, because the first level was, oh, I have all this information and all this stuff about masks, and my mom and my brothers and my family, and because of all the backpacking I've done, walking across the country 3 times for the Appalachian Trail, Pacific Crest Trail, and Continental Divide Trail.
Wow, yeah.
I have pockets of family that are scattered up and down the country, all over the place in rural America. And there are people that have opened their hearts and their homes and like invited me in, have fed me, have housed me, have just made me parts of their family that were complete strangers, right? And so we call that trail magic when people
I believe it. I'm from Appalachia.
Oh,
we have a notorious horseman who comes through town.
Yeah. So I feel like all the people coming together to make masks are providing a version of that trail magic on a much bigger scale. Kind of like we have these resources and supplies and skills that we can put out there to try to make things just a little better, even if it's for one person for one day. Like it's a thing that we can do, and
I love it.
That part is really the part that renews your faith in humanity when a lot of other things in the world may not.
I totally agree. I think it's been a remarkable, that's part of why we're doing the summit, which is to bring everybody together, have these conversations, but also record and celebrate. We're doing a give, as part of it, we're doing a giveaway. If the people sign up, then they get entered into a giveaway that all these companies have donated as thank you to the SOAS who have been working so hard. So yeah,
right. And I would like to just, for a lot of people, especially a lot of people are in positions already where the need for masks isn't as great, but that isn't everywhere. Right. That's the stuff I see on the news makes it seem like everyone that needs masks has masks. And that does not match the reality that I'm living in. And the shortages are expected to continue. And that gets into some of the more complicated issues of whose voices are heard and which stories are being told. Yeah. I guess I took this like we were all in this really positive, we're working together to solve the thing.
It's the story of the masks is really multifaceted, and I think it brings up social inequities, economic inequities. Now we've got politics injected into it in a really stupid way. And there's just a lot and then all the supply chain. So I mean, there's just a lot to all of it.
On questions I did not expect I would be hearing in March or April is what do you do when you get pepper spray or tear gas in your mask?
Right.
Yeah.
And that is a really legitimate question and concern right now.
Right. And what do you answer that? Obviously now you need at least 2 masks when you go out in case you get pepper sprayed, right? You've got to have a backup. But what do you say to that?
What I say to that is there's a lot we don't know. I can tell you I haven't seen any studies with pepper spray in a mask, but what it really means is that you should change the mask as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Especially because if you have absorbent materials, it's going to be the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah. But that polypropylene might help because it would act as a barrier a little bit more than cotton would.
So if it's in a water-based or droplet-based form,
pepper spray,
then it may help. But really, you should change your mask as soon as possible.
Yeah, change it as soon as possible. Bring 2. Bring a backup mask.
Yeah, and in fact, and once again, this gets back into the privilege of like how many masks do you have? And if you don't have a sewing machine and you haven't been sewing your own, then you might not have a dozen masks. Although that's probably the target that everybody should be working towards, because
and then the concern
as soon as it gets wet or dirty, you should change it.
Yeah. Well, the concern that I have is like we're looking at these commercial masks and they're just all over the place, and a lot of them are super cheaply made, and you don't know what they've made them out of, and they seem kind of dangerous to me on some level. You know, I mean, you just don't know. I mean, they're okay. They're probably better. I don't know if they're better than, I don't know. That they make me super nervous. There's no rating system. There's no requirements. There's no standardization.
Right. That's right. All you have to do is have a label. If it doesn't have a label telling you what the materials are and how to wash it, it is not okay.
It's not okay.
Right? You need to have a label. You have to be able to know what's in it, and you have to be able to wash it and disinfect it.
We're going to start to look at these masks and see what they're doing, because I think that's the next step, is the commercial masks of what, you know, are they letting people know? We've ordered some masks, so they should be showing up at some point. We haven't talked about, I know we've talked a long time, shields. We got shields in them. So tell me what your thoughts are about shields, like mask plus shield. Do you think that's a good thing?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, face shields are just another piece of the puzzle, right? So I think face shields are a good thing. The data out there says they're not, we all know they're not the same as masks. So a face shield and a mask is good. Yeah. And I am not a face shield specialist. So there are other people who have done all the research and analysis there. But certainly if you can do a mask and a face shield, that's better. Eye protection, face shields,
right?
Good.
Yeah. Eye protection, glasses enough, or do you want like goggles? I'm totally like, I'm going to be so suited up when I finally leave my house. I'll be like, you know, goggles, amazing.
Right, you're going to be so suited up, and then it's going to be 95, 98 degrees, and what humidity?
Just, like, fall over. That's exactly what's going to happen.
Right. Well, oh my gosh. So here we go into another topic about heat stroke.
Yes.
And heat exhaustion, and making sure that you are hydrating appropriately.
Right.
So if you're wearing a mask the way you're supposed to, if you're out for a long period of time,
drink.
You need to drink.
Yeah.
How do you drink without touching your mask?
Right. There's all these ones with the straws. Have you seen that? Like joke ones? It's not good. That must make you completely insane.
If we're talking about the things that make me cringe, we can talk about the masks with the exhalation valves.
Yes.
Because they're blowing all of your
right.
breath out over everybody.
Present to you.
Right. Me. And unlike we talked before, if you have just a single layer, it might act kind of as a diffuser to spread everything out.
Right.
But the exhalation valve might act as kind of like a focused target. It's going to, anyway.
Straws.
So we were talking about the straws. So anything that goes in and out through that control area or the mouth is bad.
I don't know. You know those are going to be popular here in New Orleans.
Yeah, they're like all these things. There are better ways to do it, and there are worse ways to do it. And taking something and how do you get the straw in without holding the bottom of the mask for one thing? So now you're touching the mask in two places. At least minimize the points of contact. And I do have some with straws.
A mask on, right? Like, so they may, you know.
Right.
If they're going to be on Bourbon Street and they're wearing a mask with a straw hole, I mean, maybe that's better. I don't know. Well, you know?
And that's that thing with why is it that people are saying maybe we shouldn't open the bars as the first things we open. Right? And it's alcohol disinhibit boundaries, right?
Yes.
People aren't as good at paying attention, not as good at motor control.
Not that
wearing a mask while drunk.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually during the beginning of things really exploding, I knew people who were going to the bars and I was like, are you crazy? And they're like, well, the alcohol will kill the virus if it's in my mouth. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like that's like a strange and very risky line of thinking.
Yes. And it's a common one. It's definitely common. And I feel like I shouldn't legitimize any of it, but the proof that you need your alcohol to be at for it to act as any kind of disinfection, right? It needs to be 160 proof.
Yeah.
Well, see, that's just a
So
challenge
if the
to some.
alcohol you're drinking is 160 proof, then you have a lot of issues ahead of you. And the chances that the behavior being engaged in while drinking alcohol of that proof is risky is high. And that is true with or without COVID as an additional risk factor. So we'll just say no on the alcohol acting as a disinfectant. And
Yeah.
we can dive into the data of how risk is likely to be amplified in those circumstances, but certainly it is in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
So drink responsibly, wear your mask responsibly, do all the things as responsibly as you can, realizing that nothing is perfect, but you got to try, eh? That's my thought anyway, right?
Yeah.
So fabulous.
We're not going to be perfect at this, but if we all try and if we all do a little bit better, right, as we move forward, if we all do a little bit better, then that's gonna amplify and hopefully lead to better and better and better until we get nearly there. So
That's really great.
I'm hoping that we'll get a chance as we go through the summer, right? And the pace is not maybe quite as frenetic as it was at the beginning. It gives us a little bit more time to think about the whys behind the things we're doing instead of doing it in panic mode.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I think that's
so that we move forward more responsibly.
Yeah. No, I think that's very true. And the scientists are catching, it takes time to do the science. So the science is it's interesting to watch sort of what's happening with that and to watch science work its thing. I mean, that doesn't happen very often. We're all watching you, that's amazing that with the new science. I mean, my kid's best friend's mom was like, hey, have you seen the American Chemical Society's latest study on masks? I was like, no, I haven't. This is regular conversation now, which is so fascinating and awesome in some way, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, and there's this new study that the WHO references that, that hasn't made it quite into the full cycles yet.
I can't wait to see it. It'll be
So,
really interesting.
and the link is there on that webpage that you were looking at.
Yeah.
We'll
take a look at it. Well, you're amazing, and you've given us so much time. I really appreciate it. We've kind of super geeked out on you, and I know everybody's going to be so excited to listen to this. Do you need to review? You don't need to review it before we post, do you?
Probably not.
No. Usually people want to view it if they've said something terrible about their family or they swore a lot, but you haven't done any of those things, so.
No, if I review it again, I'll just go, oh no, I could have said that so much better and so much more perfectly. But if you think about it as a dialogue,
it is,
right?
That's exactly
where we're all going to keep participating in.
Exactly.
That's the important bit.
Exactly. This is good. All right, hold on. Don't go away. Just let me turn off the primary recording. So you've been listening to Just Wanna Quilt, a research podcast coming out of Tulane University Law School. And I'm Elizabeth Townsend Gard. If you like this podcast, keep listening. Also, we have a Facebook group. Come join us. We talk about a lot of things. We also have an Instagram account. And of course, most importantly, I really hope you get a chance to quilt today.